Hey, everyone. Brick City Brown Chick coming at you with another episode. And this week, we are back on my all time favorite topic, which is music. And so this week, I'm going to talk about 7 band breakups that broke my musical heart. So these were breakups of bands that were very significant in my musical life and my love of music. So I'll talk a little bit about each of the bands and how I felt when they broke up. I am going to do these chronologically by year. So, in other words, the year the band broke up instead of doing it alphabetically, because it just makes the timeline easier to follow and understand. Do you remember a breakup of a band that deeply affected you? Why? Were you always a fan, or did you come to the band later and think, oh man, I missed that? Like I wasn't able to see that or experience that. I think for people of a certain generation, probably the upper end of Gen X, and for baby boomers especially, that band would be the Beatles. If you weren't born when the Beatles were super popular or you got into music sort of right before they broke up, their breakup was really devastating for folks because they realized they would never have any more new Beatles music or Beatles tours or anything like that. So for a lot of people of a certain age, that's the band they really remember. The first band I'm going to talk about is The Clash. The Clash broke up in 1986. In that year, I was 16. I was in high school. So I was not tremendously familiar with punk and post punk and the Clash or the Sex Pistols or the Pretenders or any of the other bands that were really popular at that time. You have to keep in mind if you're a millennial or Gen Z, there was no such thing as the internet. Before the internet existed, there was no such thing as cell phones or anything like that. So everything you learned about bands, you likely learned from watching MTV or some other similar video music channel. I learned a lot of what I learned about music when I was in high school. There used to be a show that was syndicated that was called something like British Invasion or European music or something like that. And I lived in the New Jersey area, so we got all the radio stations from New York. So I heard bands like the Pet Shop Boys for the first time on that show. I heard Duran Duran the first time on that show. Culture Club, Spendell Ballet, all the bands of the new wave generation I first heard listening to that show. So that's how I really got into various and sundry bands. With the Clash, I did not get into the Clash until I was in college, which my first year of college was 1988. So yeah, they had already broken up. But I really started listening to their songs and their messaging, and kind of my first thought was these guys are from London. Like the Clash were very working class and in your face about it, and made no secret about their disdain for the wealthy, the monarchy, the sort of British, upper class. Like they were just hardcore and serious and about the rights of all people. So I just found The Clash interesting and fascinating. And they're one of those bands that I am sorry I never got to see live in their time because I think The Clash were absolutely amazing. The second band on this list also broke up in 1986. 1986 is going to be a big year on this list. And unlike with The Clash, I was able to get into this band in real time because they were not American, but much more popular here than they were overseas, and that is the Police. The Police broke up in 1986 after a sort of whirlwind career. The Police were only together for 8 or 9 years, but it was kind of like a shooting star. They burned really bright, really fast, and then burned out because they got to a place where they really couldn't stand each other. Their personalities were so different. There was always a lot of tension between Sting, between the lead singer, and Stuart Copeland, the drummer. They were kind of always like this. And Andy Sumner, who was the guitar player, was always trying to play peacemaker and calm things down. But what a lot of people forget is that Andy Sumner is a decade older than Sting and Stuart Copeland. So a lot of their fights he thought were just childish and stupid, and they just really got on each other's nerves. So the Police were sort of here and they were gone, but their mark on music is forever. The Police song everybody knows is Every Breath You Take, which a lot of people don't understand is a super serious song about something we would now call stalking. In the 1980s, we didn't have a term for it, but Every Breath You Take is a song based on a real experience from Sting's real life. He had a super Uber fan that would follow him and break into his I mean, it was really crazy. It was a lot of stuff we didn't know was going on at the time, but that's where that song came from. But by the time Every Breath You Take came out, I had been into the Police long before that. Roxanne, So Lonely, Walking on the Moon. There are so many great Police songs. There are great drum lines. There are great bass lines. Of course, Sting is a great lyricist. He writes these really thought-provoking songs. And so the Police was a band that I grew up loving. I still have a couple of their albums in my vinyl collection, which I probably only have about 40 vinyl records that survived all of my moves and heat waves and all those trips over the years. But I really do cherish my vinyl collection, and the Police are in that collection. So they are an amazing band, and their breakup was not a surprise for those of us who had watched them over the years, and they'd storm out of interviews and fight with each other in public and all that. So we weren't really surprised they broke up, but we were more sort of sad that they came to an end so quickly. This one may be a surprise to a few people, but not people who know me well. This is also 1986, the third one in a row, and that is Wham. Now, I think Wham is very hard to understand out of the context of the time. I think millennial people and Gen Z people see old videos of Wham in the Dayglow shorts and the Wake Me Up Before You Go sweatshirts and the fingerless gloves and all the crazy 80s things, and they just think this was ridiculous. Like, I don't understand why people were so into Wham. What we now know about Wham that we didn't know at the time is that the intention was never for them to be together for 10 years or 20 years. George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley were best friends from when they were kids, and they grew up and they wanted to form a band, and they wanted to like go around the world and meet women and do the things that young guys do. And so one of Wham's first songs is called Young Guns. and it is a rap song. It is George Michael rapping, and he's not bad at it, honestly. And it's talking about them being young and wanting to have a good time and all that sort of stuff. I think Wham is probably more appreciated now by Gen X, by those of us who were teenagers or 20 something when Wham was popular. And we have a better understanding, especially since the death of George Michael in 2016, of what being in Wham was really like. Andrew Ridgeley, to his credit, has really taken up the torch for George Michael because he isn't here. And he's written his autobiography and he's talked very openly and lovingly about what George meant to him and how much better he understands as a man now in his early 60s of what their popularity was like and what it meant to people at the time. So when Wham broke up, I was really sad to see them go, although I did not, and I don't think anybody did, have the level of understanding about them and who they were that we do now. Okay, finally out of 1986. Number 4, we're on to 1991, The Talking Heads. If you have never watched the Talking Heads documentary, Stop Making Sense, I highly recommend you watch it. Even if you know nothing about the Talking Heads, it gives you such an interesting perspective on who that band was. David Byrne, the lead singer of the Talking Heads, who's now almost 80 years old, was always I'll use the word character, but probably not in the way you think. He was more Machiavellian. He was temperamental. He was ornery. He was very determined to do things his way and didn't always take input, even from the other members of the band, well. And what ultimately broke up the Talking Heads was David Byrne himself, because he just got frustrated from his perspective of answering to other people, even though these other people were his bandmates. The Talking Heads have been offered an obscene amount of money to get back together and do a tour, not even make a new album, but tour. And David Byrne has always flat out refused. He doesn't want to revisit the past or relive the past or whatever. So that's always been his perspective. It's always fascinated me with people who become famous or become very admired musicians who seem in their hearts to not want anything to do with it. Becoming a musician, especially like a pop musician or a rock musician or an R&B musician, is all about exposure, right? It's all about becoming famous. And there are people who work their whole lives for that and never get it. And so it's just interesting to me to listen to perspectives of people who worked hard and got that, but then weren't happy and didn't want it. So that's just an interesting background on the Talking Heads. Their music was very cutting edge and very ahead of its time. If you listen to the song Burning Down the House, you're not really sure what you're listening to. Like, it sort of sounds like a dance record, but it also sounds like some sort of creepy sci-fi new wave thing. And that was the thing about the Talking Heads. You really couldn't put them in a box. They were who they were, and people either got it or didn't. And I really enjoyed the Talking Heads, and they're one of those bands I'm sad that I never got to see. Moving on to 1999, Destiny's Child. Now, I think from a 2025 perspective, a lot of people look back on Destiny's Child as like a flash in the pan girl group. They put them in this category with like these one or two hit wonder bands that then nobody ever heard from or heard about again. But the truth is, Destiny's Child were together for 14 years. They had 8 number 1 songs. They were not a flash in the pan. They were the 90s version of the Supremes. That's who Destiny's Child was. And so I really think people, and I think this is partly because Beyonce has been so successful as a solo artist that people sort of shelve what she and Michelle and Kelly did in Destiny's Child. And I think that's a great oversight on our part. Destiny's Child was innovative and interesting. They sang R&B, but they also sang pop, and they also sang gospel. Michelle Williams, the third member of Destiny's Child, went on to become she's a gospel singer now. She has that octave and she has that voice. Kelly Rowland is an R&B singer. She has that voice. But because Beyonce stood out so much, people forget how great Destiny's Child was. They had songs that if you put them on today in a club, everybody's getting out there. Bills, 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 Emotions, Independent Women. That is my favorite Beyonce and Destiny's Child song, Independent Women, from the Charlie's Angels soundtrack. That is an amazing, amazing song. Survivor is also an amazing song. That's probably my number 2. And then my number 3 would be Emotions, which is the remake of a song from the 70s. Girlfriends, I also love. It's a song about friendship and being there when your friends need you, whether they know they need you or not. So I really do think Destiny's Child is underrated. And I hope at some point people will come back around to, yes, Beyonce is great. Beyonce is amazing. She has had an amazing solo career, but this is where she came from, and this is what helped launch her career and help make her be so great. So that's how I feel about Destiny's Child. Number 6 on this list is from 2011. That's the year they broke up. And that is R.E.M. I think a lot of younger people, like millennial people, Gen Z people, are not as familiar with R.E.M. as those of us who grew up with them, as the Gen X people are. And that's a shame, because R.E.M. is, or more accurately was, a really interesting and amazing band. There are sort of 2 distinct phases of R.E.M. There is the college radio phase, which is when a lot of college kids, including myself, got into R.E.M. They would go on these tours of college campuses across the United States, and all the college kids thought they were cool and smart and underground because they knew who R.E.M. was. And then there is the world famous global icon losing my religion phase of R.E.M. Most people like one or the other. People who got into R.E.M. when they were sort of a college radio staple tend to like the older songs. The people who didn't get into R.E.M. till after losing my religion, like the early 2000s, tend to be more of a, we like the famous stuff and we don't want to hear the old weird stuff. I actually like both phases of R.E.M. I do. I like their college phase, like I'm Sorry, Orange Crush is a song from that time period. But then I also like other things. Sidewinder Sleeps Tonight, The End of the World as We Know It, What's the Frequency, Kenneth, those type songs. So I really do enjoy both phases of REM. They had announced years before their breakup that they planned to break up after it was 20 or 25 years they had been together, that was the plan. And that is exactly what they did. And they've never gone back. They have never reunited. I'm sure they have been offered crazy amounts of money to reunite. But one thing I admire about them is they made this announcement, they said they were going to do it, and they stuck to their guns. And so if you go back and listen to REM records, you really do hear what they were going through at that particular point in time. Michael Stipe, the lead singer of REM, is a very introspective songwriter. He talks a lot about personal issues or challenges or problems he was having at a particular point in time. So if you sort of listen to REM in chronological order, you get a sense of where they were and where they came to. And I think they've always been at peace with their decision. I mean, if they weren't, they'd reunite, right? They'd do something else. But I feel like they decided we did what we came here to do. We've done everything. And now we're going to, go off into retirement and live our lives. Michael Stipe pops up occasionally on other people's records. But for the most part, since their breakup in 2011, they have just gone on with their lives. And I have to say, I admire that. A lot of bands will decide they're going to break up, and then 5 years into it, somebody decides that, oh no, I really don't want to be doing this. And everybody gets back together, and then they go out and tour, and people complain that they're terrible or that they don't have the spark or the magic or anything like that. So I think there is something to be said for leaving the stage when you're ready to leave the stage and leaving people with those good memories of you and not memories that they really wouldn't want to have. So the last band on this list is obviously the most recent breakup. And I have to be really honest here. This one, above all the others, because of the circumstances, is really the one that made me the saddest. And that is from just last year, from 2024. That is Hall and Oates. I don't think they made a big announcement about it particularly, but for people who don't know, Hall and Oates did formally break up in 2024. I have been a Hall and Oates fan since I was probably 6, 7 years old. I heard the song Rich Girl. Now, today, if you hear Rich Girl, it's like a very tame kind of song. But in 1976, there were radio stations that would not play it because I guess they didn't really have the technology that they have now to beep out words, or if they did, nobody really knew how to do it. So there's a line in Rich Girl that is repeated several times throughout the song that says, it's a bitch girl. So the word bitch was a huge deal in 1976. And as a 6-year-old, what I understood the word bitch to mean was female dog. Like, I don't know where I've read it. I looked, it's probably, I was one of those kids that would hear a word I didn't understand and then go look it up. I was a nerdy kid. I was one of those kids. So I probably looked it up and didn't get past the first definition, which is a female dog. So one day I was in the kitchen singing that song as a 6 or 7 year old. And my mother's like, what did you say? What did you say? And I was like, Mom, it's just how the song goes. And she's like, do you know what that word means? And I was like, yeah, I know what it means. It's a female dog. And she just kind of looked at me and was like, oh my God, and said, don't ever say that word again. Do not let me hear you singing or saying that word ever again. And then she just sort of stormed out of the kitchen, and I did not understand what the big deal was. Okay, of course, now I know what the big deal was. Nobody wants to hear their 6-year-old say that. But it's just one of those stories from my childhood that cracks me up because I really, really wasn't getting it. Hall Oates have been, well, were, it's hard, still hard to say were together for over 50 years. And they started out not as bandmates, but as friends. They met at Temple University in Philadelphia, and they met running from a mob or a riot or something that went on at a campus party. And the two of them were fleeing this thing, and they met each other and got to talking, and that's how that began. So over the 50 odd years they were together, what everyone thought or perceived, or however you want to look at it, is that they were friends and that their musical partnership was really a partnership. Daryl Hall is the singer and the keyboard player, and he plays guitar sometimes, and John Oates is the bass player. And one thing Hall & Oates became known for were their harmonies. Daryl Hall sang most of the songs, but John Oates did a lot of the harmonies. And so nobody ever got the feeling that they weren't friends and weren't partners. I don't know. I guess it might have been 2012, 2014, something like that, but probably a good 10 years or so before they broke up. A lot of cracks started showing in their relationship. They didn't record a new album after, it's either 1996 or 1998 was their last new album, but they went on tours sort of on an annual basis. And so I saw Hall & Oates probably a half a dozen times as a grown person. You didn't get the sense that there was animosity in their relationship, but on stage you sort of got the feeling of there was something not quite right, we'll say. In recent years, they have been very vocal about the fact that they were in a band together, but their friendship had long ago eroded or faded, which was kind of weird, but okay. It's like you've been friends with this person for 30 odd years, and now you're like, yeah, we're really not friends. And that was the reason they gave for no longer recording together. And then this all really blew up, I think, in like 2021. They have a musical company together, which is like where their songwriting rights and all those sorts of things, the business side of music is there. And I don't remember what it's called, but it's not, it's something like, Hall & Oates Productions or whatever it's called. John Oates decided that as a man about to hit his 70s, he wanted to sell his half of their business. And so he made plans to do that, allegedly without consulting Daryl Hall. And Daryl Hall was infuriated by this and took him to court to stop him being able to sell his half of their business. And they started making comments about each other that just got really nasty and really personal. And truth be told, Daryl Hall has been much more vocal and I think much more nasty about the situation than John Oates has. John Oates has pretty much said, look, everybody does this. Like Tina Turner did this a few years before she died. Katy Perry's done it. Justin Timberlake's done it. I don't understand why this is a big deal. It's like Daryl's always wanted to be his own man, so now he gets to be his own man. Like, I don't know why this is a thing. Whereas Daryl Hall has framed this as John Oates betrayed him. He cannot believe this is something he would do. But he's gone much further. He's now gone on to say he and John Oates were never musical partners, that he, Daryl Hall, was always the creative force behind Hall & Oates, and basically that like John Oates was just a musician who was there. I mean, just vicious and awful. And all I can think as, pretty much a lifelong fan is, oh my God, you are two men in your 70s. Grow the hell up. Like, there is not a lot of time left for the two of you to reconcile this relationship. Okay, maybe they don't want to reconcile. I don't mean musically, I just mean as friends. Maybe they don't want to do that. But it's just hard for me to comprehend that after being friends for so many years, that you can just be like, yeah, I hate this person and I'm done. And so for me, this is the biggest breakup and has made me the saddest from their personal perspective and also from their musical perspective, because it is now hard for me to listen to Hall & Oates songs without thinking of all this crazy nonsense and thinking, okay, I'm not saying their friendship was fake, but it's like, did they ever really care about each other? Did they always feel this way about each other and they just put on an act? Like, it just makes you think all sorts of things. Their current situation with each other does not take away their brilliance, does not take away their hitmaker status. Back in the 80s when they were super popular, people dubbed them like blue-eyed soul. And that's a term that Daryl Hall's always hated, because to him that means you don't take me seriously as a soul singer because I'm white. Like, you're trying to emphasize the fact that I'm white. When I grew up living on Motown, listening to the Temptations and the Four Tops and the Supremes, and like, don't degrade me that way. I've never found that term degrading. I understand why he does, but people really did see Hall & Oates as, yes, they were two white guys, but I heard somebody at a Hall & Oates concert one time say they're the most soulful white guys you will ever see. And one very distinct thing that I always noticed at Hall & Oates concerts is it was pretty evenly split. There were probably as many black people at those shows as there were white people. And that's rare. Even today, I can honestly say the only other band I've seen in recent years that has that kind of following is Earth, Wind, and Fire. Earth, Wind, and Fire is always a very racially mixed audience, and Hall & Oates had that magic too. And it's sad the way things have ended, or the way they've chosen to end things between them, their business relationship and their personal relationship. But it doesn't take away from me the magic and my love of great Hall & Oates songs. So that is my list, everyone. Those are the 7 band breakups that were really moving or saddening or devastating for my love of music. Do you have any bands that you feel that strongly about? Please let me know down in the comments. If you are not subscribed to this podcast, please do so. There's a subscription button somewhere right down here beneath my head. If you enjoyed this podcast, please pass it on to other people. I am looking to expand my podcast audience and get my weekly messages out to more folks. I want to thank everybody for listening this week. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We will have more music-related episodes coming up, so please look for those. And I'll see everybody next week. Take care.